Hey guys, Veronica here. So today I'm going to be working on the raised beds, specifically the soil that's in them. It's a little bit too early still for us to plant any sort of vegetables for spring and summer. And I'm not going to try and play catch up with the winter vegetables like the brassicas and all of the various root veggies that you might plant, a month or two ago. But I do want to do a little bit of soil work in this space before we start getting in a lot of the heavier feeders. Now, as you can see in this bed behind me, the soil level is fairly low. And initially, one of the things that I thought about doing was digging it all out and then starting to layer in some other materials just to try and get some nutrient cycling. So materials from around the yard, from like the wood chip pile and the bamboo patch and the places I've pointed out in previous episodes. I started poking around the other raised bed that's off to the side here that I've put some peas in, and realized that there's already nutrient cycling happening in these beds, and there might actually be some soil structure in place. So rather than digging that all out and disturbing, any sort of layers that are happening, I'm going to follow my number one rule of thumb when it comes to entering a new space, and to some extent observe what's going on with as much minimal interference as possible. Now, I will say that there are very few soils that you can get out there that don't need some level of conditioning when it comes to increasing the organic matter, the soil organic matter that's in those blends. So I'll show you a handful of this actually. So this soil came from a place that's nearby that's called the dump, and it's literally a dump, but also they do a lot of processing of like landscape waste and all of that sort of stuff, and so they sell a soil blend there, and that's what was used to fill these. As you can see, it's compacted and collapsed a little. There's a lot of perlite in this mix, and it feels like there's also a lot of sand, so I don't see that it wouldn't benefit from some organic matter. And since I travel with a jar of cover crop seeds, that's what's going in here. So I just wanted to show you guys how I do this broadcast mix, because while I've covered a little in Instagram stories, I don't think that I've really done a video about it, like the method to my madness here. So let me show you. I've been soaking, I had about a cup and a half of cover crop seeds that I had to split between two containers because I started soaking them this morning, like late morning, and they started to swell and soaked up all the liquid in one container. So it's split now. But this is the same mix that I was using in Texas. So it's that, 24 different species of grains, grasses, legumes, brassicas, root vegetables, etc. And this is going to be a good diverse mix to add, again, some level of organic matter to the soil to get more nutrient cycling, to try and encourage some of the indigenous microorganisms that are definitely below these beds to start coming up and helping to process and break down some of this, so that we will have a lot more nutrients and water retention and infiltration for our vegetables when we're ready to plant those out in the next month or so here. Now what I do is I get a bucket or a wheelbarrow and I put about a gallon or two of soil for this sort of mix. And since my seeds are soaked, they don't broadcast as easily, because you'll see they kind of just clump together in like this gross wet mess. So by mixing them into a container of soil, then you can help to broadcast them a little more evenly around whatever space you're planting them. So I'll just dump this in. It doesn't hurt that they're wet, because that'll help some of that soil to adhere. I'm just using a bagged mix. I want to say it's probably Kellogg's, and it's their organic mix. It was the best thing that I could find at the big box store, so that's where we're starting with this project. And good, better, best as we go, but I'm not terribly unhappy with what I've seen from this mix so far. I've been using it for potting up in addition to my seed starting mix for some of the seedlings that are outgrowing the pots. So I'll just dump both of these containers of soaked seeds into here, into this bucket, and then I'm going to take two other things. So a little bit of this root zone starter food that you guys saw me use as I was getting my seedlings going, mixing it in with my seed starting mix and playing with activating some bacteria and whatnot. And so I'll put just a couple tablespoons in there. Make sure that you're upwind from it because it does get a little dusty, and I don't think you want to be inhaling any of this stuff. And then I'll also add just a tiny bit of azomite because I have some on hand. And there's very few agricultural soils. Again, this has been used before. These raised beds have been used before, and I'm not sure for how many seasons. But there's very few that don't lack some level of minerals, and so I like to add the azomite to try and kind of remineralize to some extent. And then I just get in here and I mix it like I'm mixing bread dough. And so just turning it from the bottom, I don't know if you can see that, yeah. Just turning it from the bottom and kind of rotating the bucket as I turn until it seems like it's pretty well mixed. Now, if you see more seeds than soil, then add some more soil. And I guess the other way doesn't really work, huh? If you see more soil than seeds, then add more seeds, because they won't be soaked. But I prefer to soak them because I feel like it gives them a jump start on germination, and then they do a little bit better in terms of, getting up and getting going, and not waiting to really be watered in. So not going through so much of the wet-dry cycle, but like sprouting within the next 2 to 3 days, which is what I'm usually looking for. So they're going to be left to their own devices for a week or two. So yeah, we got to get them going now. But so now that I have that mixed up, then what I'll do is I'll just come around and I'll take a rake, loosen up just this top part of the soil, and you can see, I'll bring some over to you because it's like all floated to the top with the rain. So you can see just like the crazy amount of perlite that's in this. So, I mean, that's adding, drainage and levels of porosity and whatnot to the surface of the soil, but it was also kind of, a lot of it had floated up in this mix, which means there's a lot of perlite, and also it kind of creates a little bit of a hygroscopic thing on the top level of the soil. I don't know why, but there's like a crust layer that happens whenever I work with it in large quantities in a mix. So, yeah. So we're just going to kind of break that in, get it nice and mixed in so that we can get some seeds down. And just level this out a little. There's a few nettles and clover and stuff in here, which is why I'm not particularly worried about starting nutrient cycling from the bottom up. I think that we can kind of work from the top down and see, how far we're able to get. And for all I know, this could fail, and then we gotta start over. But these cover crop seeds have been, let's see if I block out the sun for you guys. These cover crop seeds have been pretty resilient, no matter where I put them. So I feel like in some nice, sort of loose raised bed soil, they'll do all right. So once this is level enough to my liking and loose enough, then all I'll do, let's see. Actually, yeah, I'm going to I'll pull a little bit of soil off to the side so I have something to rake over what I'm broadcasting. I could just press them in as well, but since there are some larger seeds for like peas and beans and whatnot, and various legumes, I'd like them to be a little more covered, because otherwise they sprout kind of weird. So I'll just rake this off to the side. And there's I'm trying to think how big this is, because I haven't measured it, but I want to tell you that it's at least 5 or 6 by 10 or 12, so they're decent sized beds. I'm going to get a fair amount of veggies in them. I'm pretty sure I already have enough seedlings going to fill these entire things, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. If I have to add them in the yard or pots or whatever, I'm sure I'll always find space, right? So then what I'll do is you'll see, I'll show you this before I broadcast it. You'll notice, handful without super small seeds there. You'll notice that you can see all of the seeds that are mixed into the soil now. So you're not throwing out like a handful of seeds and it's just like one big clump here and then like a couple here and there. Hopefully you've mixed it into enough soil that when you broadcast it, they'll be a little bit more evenly dispersed. And then also have a little bit of, food and minerals and hopefully the right microbes stuck to them. So that's the goal with doing a mix like this instead of, just dispersing seeds at random. This has worked really well for me in terms of cover crops, wildflowers, mixed greens. It's kind of my go-to method, and I don't know why I haven't covered it sooner, but I figured, it's worth sharing. So then we're just going to take these handfuls and I kind of just like sprinkle them into each of these squares in this grid. And I'll do like a full handful scoop. So it's like both my hands together with the scoop for each 2x3 space. And then I'll come back through with the excess if that covers everything. But just trying to get it, spread out a little more evenly to get going in here. It's not hard to add more seeds. It's not hard to pull stuff out if you have too many seeds, but it's kind of a waste of seed. So, erring on the side of just enough. And some might get eaten by wildlife, but that's okay. I try to plant enough for everyone. That's the goal. That's pretty much it. Then I just take the rake. I'm going to push the soil I pulled away that I just barely scraped off the top right back over so that the seeds don't look like great bird food. The less visible they are, the better right now. And then I'll water them in, and then it'll be good to go. The other thing that I'm going to put in this space that I want to mention before I run out of daylight is I picked up these sunchokes, which any gardener who's grown them knows. They're like, no, don't put them in, you'll never get rid of them, but that's okay. I picked up these sunchokes at the farmer's market. One, because I know tons of farmers who are always looking for sunchoke seeds because they sell all of their harvest and then they don't have any left to plant, so it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of backup for trades. Two, because I think that they're delicious. Three, because they make beautiful sunflowers, and so, or they look like sunflowers, same family. So I'll just put those along this back edge in this raised bed. If for some reason I end up not wanting them there later, they're not difficult to pull out. They make these tubers so you can kind of transplant them. They won't be the happiest things, but they won't be, like hate you forever either, so they'll get over it. But anyway, I'm going to plant these sunchokes right along this back edge. In the other bed that already has peas in it, I've blended up a different mix for the squares that are not in use currently. And so this is the thing with cover crops, you guys. It does not have to be like the mix that I ordered for the field in Texas that had, the grasses and grains and brassicas and legumes. I basically was trying to cover all of my bases and just get something to grow in that. It's a good direction to go, but it doesn't have to be that way. The goal is always to have your soil covered, right? And so, no bare soil. In the bare spots in the other bed, what this is a mix of is you can see floating on top, there's some coriander that wouldn't fit in the spice jar. That's cilantro seeds. So those are in here. There's a variety of like mustards. There's a little bit of lettuce that I didn't soak that I'm going to add. They don't always soak super well, so I just didn't put them in here. What else did I put in here? I'm trying to think. Let's see. Oh, there's some fennel, there's parsley, there's some lentils that wouldn't fit in the jar. Oh, and there's buckwheat and there's red clover. And so poke around your kitchen, poke around your local garden center. Usually the large packets of things like buckwheat or crimson clover, even alfalfa, will cover most raised beds. Like one pack will be more than enough to cover a raised bed. I like to do a mix like this because I can chop it and drop it. There's, various plants in here that are going to do some level of bioaccumulation and help to sort of make various nutrients a little bit more bioavailable for other plants I'm going to plant in. Most of these have flowers at various times early in the spring and going into the summer. And so things like the cilantro, the coriander, the parsley, the fennel, all of those things will bloom and attract tons of pollinators, which we definitely need once we get vegetables in place. So cover crops do not have to be just peas and beans and grasses and grains and whatever. They can definitely be just something to keep your soil covered and feed your pollinators. There's still root exodus happening with those lighter feeding herbs and greens, and there's still nutrient cycling happening. So don't be afraid to dig through your cabinet, go through all of your old seeds, and start just dumping those, like mixing them together, dumping them into whether you have raised beds, containers, whatever, and just play with, one, not hoarding old seeds until they're not viable anymore, but also keeping soil covered and playing with, chopping and dropping that mix as you need to plant something else versus digging everything out. And letting some things, go wild and bloom for your pollinators and for all of your beneficial insects that are going to come in and deal with your aphid problems and, all of your pest problems you're going to have early in the spring. Without those pollinating plants, those high nectar plants like the herbs I mentioned, then your odds of attracting things like lacewings and ladybugs are just a little bit lower. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. You can also mix flowers into that blend. I didn't do any in this one because I'm not sure how long they're going to last in there, but I can always dig out chunks and plugs if I want to keep some when we go to add a little bit more soil to this mix. So one more thing before I close this out. So there was the other thing I was soaking for that bed over there. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it in that one or this one, to be honest. I haven't figured it out. But I got these giant fava beans, and so those are going to go in somewhere too. Gorgeous flowers, great nitrogen fixing, fun to eat if you're able to eat them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you have any questions about cover cropping, soil building, please leave them in the comments below. I will do my best to help you. I'm sure there are tons of other really smart, amazing gardeners in the comment section that would love to help you as well if I cannot. And yeah, leave your comments, leave your questions. Follow me on Instagram at FlavorKit for more, gardening tips and tricks and food-related things throughout the week. And until next time, happy gardening. Oh yeah, hit that subscribe button. Okay, bye.